Ruben was 12 days old. I was just feeling desperate. I was so embarrassed to go. My husband couldn't come with me because I think he had a court hearing for work, so he couldn't come with me to help. I was so embarrassed because at that point it took like 2 to 3 people literally to feed Ruben, because they gave me like a nipple shield, the syringe that you would like slide through the nipple shield. You had to fill the syringe with pumped milk and then press that down so Ruben would kind of get the idea that he's supposed to suck, and that's how he would get milk.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 72. Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. This is your host, Lori Jill Eisenstadt, IBCLC. My guest for this episode is another very lovely person who just embodies the person who I started this show for. I really want mothers to know that breastfeeding does not come so naturally for many of us. When it does, and you are that person, everything is beautiful. For some of us, we need help, the right help, and quickly, so as to avoid giving up because the pain or emotional suffering is so great. My guest is able to really put into words the feelings that so many of us experience when we have our first baby. We just really expect things to go well with the birth and with breastfeeding, and when one or both of those does not go well, we are, I think many of us are in a bit of shock. Tori had a very difficult start to breastfeeding, and the emotions she expresses just makes me feel so connected to her, as I too struggled so much with my first baby. The pain, the uncertainty, the embarrassment of thinking I should know better, the feelings of desperation. Oh, do I remember those feelings of desperation? All I wanted to do was to be that person in the posters and the pictures in the book who held their baby at their breast and fed her with a big smile on her face, blissfully and in love from day one. That was not to be with my first daughter, Alicia. Through all of her pain and suffering, my guest persevered. Even when she was afraid, she just kept going. Her intuition paid off, she got the help she needed, and soon she was that mom who was blissfully breastfeeding her baby. I can't wait for you to meet her. Let's get started. Tori Levine is the founder of Babies at the Bar, a mommy and me fitness class done while babies are worn in a baby carrier and designed to help moms regain core and pelvic floor strength without damaging their healing bodies. Clients rave that this class is a great way for moms to exercise while bonding with their baby. Tori lives in Pennsylvania with her husband Isaac and her almost 2-year-old son Ruben and their dog. I would love to welcome Tori to the All About Breastfeeding show.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I love your business. It's such an important topic, and we're going to get into all that a little bit later, but it did bring back memories. I was doing yoga before my first was born, and at a certain point in pregnancy, I didn't have a teacher, and I just felt quite imbalanced, and probably in my 8th month, I just couldn't do it anymore. But when my first Alicia was about 3 months old, I started doing yoga again, and that worked really well. until she was crawling, and she'd be crawling on my back as I'd be trying to do the different poses. and I'm like pushing her gently to the side, here, you do it too. And she just wanted to be like on top of me while I did it. I didn't have a teacher for that, and I wish I could remember, but I saw someone on the internet literally doing yoga poses with her child on her back. And it was probably about a 1.5, 2-year-old child. And it seems like it wasn't like happenstance, because my kid was crawling all over me.
Right.
These were very dedicated moves. And so, but anyway, for me, it just got impossible. And I would have loved to have had an opportunity to take your class, because that would have helped, like you said, regaining core and pelvic floor strength. And wow, that's amazing. So can't wait to get into all that. I would love for you to start with telling us just a little bit about the family that you grew up in, where you grew up, and siblings. Then we're going to get into all the other good stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg. I lived with my mom and dad until I was 3. They got divorced. And then I went and lived with my mom and had like visitation with my dad. But I have a half brother, a stepbrother and stepsister. So we were all together like at my dad's house every few weekends. So I kind of had like the single child growing up and also the youngest child growing up. I have like some of both worlds.
There's a lot of kids who say if it was done well, that it actually enriched their life, having different households to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind all the discipline stuff, but, different exposure to sisters, brothers, half-sisters, half-brothers, and not only that, but all the wonderful things that our parents bring to the table, their love of religion or politics or music and science and crafts. So do you feel that your life was enriched because of that?
I would say my mom was the one who did all of the like arts and things, because I was a dancer growing up. We would always, for a long time, for about once a year, we would go to New York City and spend the weekend, see shows. So that was definitely very enriching. And then it was a very different at my dad's, where, I had all the siblings. I would go to my stepsister. She was in like a Croatian folk music band. So that was something I never would have experienced had, I not been in that family. So yes, I had very different but enriching experiences at both.
Yeah, some really cool stuff. So it sounds like you got at least some of your love of dance from your mom?
Yes.
So since you were dancing as a young kid, one of the things I like to talk about is when you were a little kid, did you ever dream about doing something as an adult? And was that the same? If you did have dreams, was that what you're doing now?
I definitely always thought I was going to be a ballerina. Then as I grew older, my goals were to dance for a while and then become a physical therapist. So through lots of different changes in, how I went to college, injuries that kind of changed the path for me, I've come around. I did social work, counseling for a while, but I really always wanted that, working with my body, working with other people's bodies to help them. And then this opportunity to become a Pilates instructor came up, and I was like, oh, that's it. That is definitely what I want to do. I'll be able to help people. I can tie into that like knowledge from all the physical therapy that I wanted to do, and then also involve my body and other people's bodies like you would as a dancer.
Yeah, which is wonderful because sometimes we just get tunnel vision about what it is that we want to do or think we can do. Mm-hmm. And then as things evolve and we become exposed to more things, we realize there's a whole world out there. So you've been able to do a lot with your dancing background.
Right.
Did you ever have a conversation with your mom? Do you know if she breastfed you?
I did. Right after we set up our interview, actually, I talked to her, and I know I was breastfed for a while just because there's a funny story. This is the reason I know I was definitely breastfed. We were at my grandparents' house one time, and she was getting ready to go in the shower, and I was a toddler. I had, I guess, stopped breastfeeding for a while. I don't know how old I was. And I went in and I was like, I want those. So she likes to tell that story. But then I did ask her, because I know my mom went back to work when I was about 2 months old, I believe. So I wasn't sure how much longer I was breastfed just because of how difficult pumping was, when I was a baby for mothers and work. But I asked her and she said that she remembers pretty much to the day that I stopped. I was 14 and a half months old and she had to go away for a business trip. And that was it.
That's so interesting. At that point, you probably weren't breastfeeding that
often,
much.
Yeah.
Curious, did she give you any insight how she managed returning to work and providing milk for you?
I did not ask that. So I'm not sure how that all worked. But I know she just said that when she went away, it was very hard. She was just crying, and which being a mom now, I definitely would understand.
Yeah, before being a mom, you were like, what the hey? What's the big deal?
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about your breastfeeding experience with your son, Ruben. And I'm always curious to know if you remember at all before you were pregnant or during your pregnancy, what your thoughts were about breastfeeding. Were you planning on breastfeeding? Were you concerned about breastfeeding? And what, if anything, did you do to prepare, such as taking classes? Did you hang out with other breastfeeding moms at that point, watch videos, read books? So again, your thoughts about breastfeeding and then what you did to prepare, if anything.
Sure. So I kind of find myself a little bit different than other moms because I feel like I've become very laid back about things when I was pregnant, and I just knew like we were going to try breastfeeding. That's what I wanted to do. There was no question about it. We went to a class that was provided by the hospital along with like the childbirth classes and things, but this was a full day just about breastfeeding. And honestly, I can't tell you much of what I remember about it because it was just so much at once. But I think it really helped because they encouraged partners to come. I think it really helped my husband to understand, and then later after Ruben was born, to understand and help me out.
Your husband now knew.
Yes.
At least some of the things that you knew. And because when you're breastfeeding for the first time, there's a huge learning curve. And when just the one half of the partnership takes a class and now learns your baby's going to be breastfeeding 8 or 9 times a day, you're going to be sitting on the couch for a half hour to hour each time, that you're not going to be able to measure what they take. So you're going to look for other signs. And we talk about the signs and talk about how it shouldn't hurt and a myriad of things. And if they haven't had any information about this at all, we're mostly all blown away after we have the baby. But I think even more so if there's no knowledge of breastfeeding whatsoever. So do you feel like he felt it was helpful for him?
Yes. So yeah, he definitely felt it was helpful. And then to finish your question, after Ruben was born, I knew people would always ask, and we had a lot of difficulty. He didn't latch until he was 3 weeks, but it was always, we're trying, we're going to get it done. And then people say, well, so what is your goal? I had no idea I was supposed to have a goal of how long I wanted to breastfeed him. So I was like, well, we're just going to go till he's done. I was like, am I supposed to have a goal where I'm supposed to stop at some point? I never had any thoughts about that. It was just like, it's working. We're just going to do it till it stops,
Yeah, I know a lot of people are asked that question. I hear a lot of consultants ask Mom that question, and it's rare. There are certain circumstances that makes me just want to have a mom really think about what she's doing, maybe because she's just all over the place. But I've seen thousands of women, and maybe 30 or 40 times I've found it valuable to ask that question, because when I think about if someone asked me, I would have the same attitude, like, this was the plan and this is what I was going to do. Now you tell me I have a goal and I think I'm in school and I'm being tested and I have to have a plan, and now my brain goes to another whole place, and now it's another reason for me to feel like I'm failing here because I don't have a goal.
Right, yeah.
So tell me about the first 3 weeks. You had mentioned that you were having some difficulty with Ruben latching on.
Yes. So We had a few bumps in the road. In the hospital, they started me pumping because they didn't think he was latching properly. And then we learned how to finger feed him. And after several trips, we saw the lactation consultant in the hospital. I was there probably once or twice a week for the first month. They were amazing and gave us all types of insight. We got, syringes, tubes, everything to help teach him basically how to latch. We found out then that he had a tongue tie. So we took him to a local plastic surgeon. I always like to say that he went to the baby plastic surgeon, and they fixed, it was a very minor tongue tie, but what no one had noticed was that he had a very severe lip tie, and they fixed that. And so I have to be very thankful because the lactation consultant told me about a La Leche League meeting, which I had no idea what that was, anything about like meetings for moms. And they were the ones who pushed me to go see the doctor. And that was a whole nother experience. Ruben was 12 days old. I was just feeling desperate. I was so embarrassed to go. My husband couldn't come with me because I think he had a court hearing for work. So he couldn't come with me to help. I was so embarrassed because at that point it took like 2 to 3 people literally to feed Ruben, because they gave me like a nipple shield, the syringe that you would like slide through the nipple shield. You had to fill the syringe with pumped milk and then press that down so Ruben would kind of get the idea that he's supposed to suck, and that's how he would get milk. My mother-in-law went with me. I had no clue. I thought these other people were just going to stare at me, and I literally started talking and just burst into tears, and they were so amazing and helpful and recommended this doctor. They told me their stories that most of them all had the same experience if their kids had a tongue or lip tie. Fast forward, we got into the plastic surgeon the next day, and they fixed everything. They said sometimes baby will latch immediately afterwards. Sometimes it takes a little while. I think it took about another week and a half with more trips to the lactation consultant. We were fortunate enough, like the head lactation consultant lives about a block from us and is in the Jewish community with us and knows my mother-in-law. So she gave me her phone number and she came over to our house and helped me. And I like to say that Ruben only would latch if there was an audience. He latched once in the hospital with a lactation consultant. He latched when the lactation consultant came to the house. And then that was it. They recommended a few different ways, and you would know what it's called. Is it the biological nursing position where you lay on your back?
Yeah, sometimes it's also called laid back nursing.
Okay. So that is, I can still remember I was laying in bed. We were trying, and Isaac was he's prompting me. He's like, do this. They recommend just, have your shirt off. Don't have anything away. Have baby just in a diaper. And he helped kind of get Ruben on my stomach, and little baby bobbing head was going around, and then he got it. And after that, it was his 3-week birthday. I said he just needed to be, a little bit older, and then it worked. And then from then on, he's been a pro.
What a story. You had said that you were given a lot of help initially because he just wasn't latching on, and you went through a process of using various ways to feed Ruben with finger feeding and tubes and then syringe.
Yes.
I'm curious to know if you remember at that time, was those ways that did you feel like you were just pushing fluid into him and then he would swallow? Or do you feel like he was working and using his tongue and getting the milk himself? Was he able to put any effort into the syringe feed, or was it all on your part?
He did really well if we did a finger feeding, with the pinky and then syringe to push the milk in, because you could feel him as sucking. when we would do the nipple shield with the tube through that, there were times that it was just like we were just pushing milk into his mouth. It took a while. We went from the syringe with the tube to kind of like a vacuum. Like he learned to start sucking to get the milk, and then he would get it because we would have the tube like in a cup of milk. So he would actually have to work to get the milk out instead of just pushing it into his mouth. And that was like another step and segue into helping him. And I think that's really what got him to learn, as well as with getting a little bit older, but that he had to work to get the milk out.
And when you were going to the lactation consultants, do you recall how early on they told you that they felt that he may have been tongue and or lip tied?
The lactation consultant actually told us when we were in the hospital that she thought, but she told us to ask the doctor, and the doctor did not think so.
Doctor meaning your
Our
baby's
pediatrician? Yes, the pediatrician.
Okay. So you're given knowledge that this might be something by the consultants, then your pediatrician says no, you're still home struggling. At a certain point you turned on to La Leche League. And, man, I totally get what you talk about, feeling embarrassed and hesitant, and then you go in and you open up your mouth and the tears probably flow. Yes. I think so many of us can really appreciate that and just know that we were there once also. And so do you feel like that was the turning point for you emotionally to meet other mothers with babies that were breastfeeding and telling you that they had a similar story? So it perhaps, I wonder if it made you feel like, well, maybe this is so. Maybe this is what my baby has, and allowed you to entertain the thought a little bit more and go to the next step of making an appointment with the plastic surgeon?
Yes, that was definitely it, because actually I remember my mother-in-law dropped me off at the meeting, and then my husband came. It was at the grocery store. There's like a little community center, and then he came and picked us up. And I remember I talked to him. I told him, I was like, I'm calling. We were calling while we were in the grocery store, walking around, trying to set up a time, because I was telling him the stories. I said, we just have to go. They said, try. It's not going to do anything. And thankfully, it wasn't covered by our insurance. So I was like, we're just going to do it. And he actually, afterwards, the next day, I remember him saying, I don't know if he thanked me, but he said, good job. You knew what was going on with your baby. And thank you, for trusting your instincts and, forcing us to go.
Oh, that's so cool. That gives me goosebumps.
Yeah. Yes, my heart is, welling up thinking about all these things now.
Yeah, well, it's a very overwhelming hormonal time. It's very emotional, and people are telling you all this stuff, and not that anything could have changed, taking classes or videos or et cetera, but honestly, you just go into breastfeeding thinking, you take a class, but you're also just thinking, well, this is the plan, and then you just have all of these problems, and this is a big, big, big reason why women give up on breastfeeding, because perhaps they never even learned what the problem was. Mm-hmm. B, if they do learn what the problem is, there's a conflict of information between what you think is going on, what a physician says, what your consultant says, maybe what your husband and family members are saying, and there's not necessarily one clear-cut way or thought process, because nobody's giving you any guarantees. And then you got to go to the next step of, bringing your beautiful baby in for a procedure. So there's a lot that happens to get you to that point. And so those are all the things that's so overwhelming and emotional, right?
Right. Yes. And it's also, everyone thinks it's natural. It's a natural thing. It's going to be quick and easy. And it's, like you've talked about on your other shows, no one really discusses with women that there can be hurdles and bumps along the way, but that you can overcome them. So,
do you remember ever hitting a wall where there was times when you thought, I just can't continue doing this, I'm going to have to pump and bottle. I just can't do this anymore in those very early weeks?
Yeah, in those early weeks, I had a lot of support for people saying, you can do it, or, it's not the end of the world if you just have to pump and bottle feed. One of the first time we went to the lactation consultant in the hospital, I just tried to hold it together, but I broke down because she was saying, you need to just stop and give him a bottle because he's not gaining weight, which was fine. We tried, but then we as well had problems with that because he just really didn't know how to properly take a bottle even. And it would either be the only way he would eat properly would be like through a finger feeding, because for a bottle he would chug it and then, way too fast, it would come right back out. So during those 3 weeks, it was very difficult because I felt like I was always either feeding him or hooked up to the breast pump. And because I would feed him, pump to finish if he didn't get anything and to keep my supply up. And I was just like, okay, this is just way too much. And luckily my husband was off for the first 3 weeks, and we were approaching that time when I was trying to figure out how am I going to do this, because Isaac would need to take Reuben so that I could pump. I was like, well, you're going to go back to work. I'm not going to have anybody. I don't know how I'm going to try to feed him, then lay him down and pump, because that just doesn't work. So it was just, I was coming to that point where I was going to say, okay, we'll do it. We'll keep trying, but we might not be able to try as often.
Yeah, that's a huge issue for moms, that even if you do have good support and you know what it is you want to accomplish and you have the tenacity to keep going, the realization that you have now taken on like 3 more jobs because you're not sitting with the baby at the breast, and when they're done, they're having a good feeding, they're full, there's no pumping, there's no supplementing, and perhaps you have a fussy baby that you need to caretake for, but you don't have to leave your baby to do these other jobs. And when you don't have someone else with you, you can, but it's difficult holding your baby when you're doing all of the other stuff. And so when you realize that your helper or helpers are going to be gone, that's like another wall. Like, I really want to do this, but logistically speaking, how can I do this? And you're looking at the days being crossed off of the calendar and thinking, that adds just another layer of stress. Like, I need to get this going before this person goes back to work and I'm alone with my baby. And so that's another emotional hurdle that mothers are taking a look at in the whole decision-making process.
Yes, definitely.
The other thing that you mentioned that's interesting is that I wouldn't necessarily say to not give your baby a bottle. Every situation is different. However, when I'm working with a mom and we're struggling with her latching on, and she may be in denial about her baby having a tongue tie in this instance, or an upper lip tie, and she's still in that in-between stage and not sure, but she's leaning towards not doing anything. And then she starts giving her baby a bottle and then realizing, wow, I assumed that this would just be the answer, like everything leading up to this, as hard of a time as I was having and as much as I was going to keep working at this, you always have in the back of your head, well, if this doesn't work, then I'm just going to give my baby a bottle. And then a mom will give a baby a bottle. And sometimes, like you said, in your case, the baby does not do well with the bottle either. There's lots of spillage. They're gulping it down. And you realize, well, this feeding method isn't working too well either. And then there's that stress of, well, I'm having problems bottle feeding and breastfeeding. And sometimes I feel that's a turning point for a mom to really take a look seriously at perhaps there is something else going on. And in your case, tongue tie and lip tie, because you're having a problem whatever feeding method you're choosing.
Right.
Yeah, and then everything escalates emotionally. So it was really wonderful for you that it sounds like maybe Reuben took a little bit more time. Some babies take weeks more until they kind of figure it out. In your case, thankfully, he figured it out. Sounds like around the time right before your husband went back to work or right afterwards, and that made life much easier for you.
Yes. Right before, luckily, and that made the whole transition and nerves nervousness of, being alone go much better.
Taking a little break so I can share this info with you. I am really psyched to be able to share this next piece of news with you. My regular listeners are very familiar at this point with Momentum, the organization that I talk about on each show. You know the one that I say saved my life as a new mother, the organization that helped me find other mothers who were new at this whole mothering thing. They became my people. They helped me navigate that first year of motherhood and continue to mother me as I had more kids and my need for support through their toddler years and kindergarten years and elementary school years just kept being needed. I made lifelong friends and they were so helpful that I am doing all I can to continue to support the organization. I want Momentum to continue to thrive, and I want you, my All About Breastfeeding audience, to experience just some of what Momentum is all about. The ladies of Momentum have agreed to give my listeners a 14-day trial membership so you can see what this mother-centered thing is all about at no cost to you. Just hop on over to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast. You will see a link from Momentum, it's in blue, and you just click it on and it will bring you to the page for you to sign up for your free trial. Honestly and truly, there's absolutely no cost to you. This is just a great opportunity for you to enjoy the discussion groups and the blogs and webinars and educational pieces that are available for free for you. I will have a link to this in the show notes. And now, back to the show. Talk a little bit about the pumping routine that you had created and the feelings that you had when you realized that you didn't need to do the whole routine of pumping.
I basically would pump every time after we would do a feeding. And then once he started nursing, I still pumped a little bit, probably a lot because of trying to build a supply, have a stash, and just in case my husband would be able to feed him overnight, to have some milk for that. But yes, going from I don't know how many times a day down to maybe twice a day was a huge relief.
It's like freedom.
Yes.
And then you really get into the convenience of, I call it just, take the baby in the boobs and go.
Yes, that was definitely it. I had a and then also I would pump because if we were out, we would take a bottle. I was not very confident or sure about breastfeeding in public in the beginning. When Reuben was 5 weeks old, my best friend got married and we went on a family trip down to Virginia. And I remember being out with him. We would plan everything around feedings, run out, and I had a cover, which he was not fond of. He, if you're not covering your baby at home and you try to do that, out in public, no, that is not going to work. He would just...
Let's do something new and cover your face.
Yeah. So I did that, and then we had bottles, but he wasn't happy with the bottle. And I remember just having this panic attack. We were walking through a little mall area that was right across from our hotel, and he was hungry. And all I wanted to do was take him out and feed him, but I just didn't know the mechanics of it. I was just not comfortable with it. And at that point, I think it was either while we were still on the trip or when we got home, Isaac and I had to sit down, talk, and I was like, I just can't do this. If he's hungry, I don't care what other people think. I'm going to get him out and feed him. And then I went to one of the mommy groups, and I kind of asked them about feeding their baby in public because I had been fine at, the mommy groups. That's kind of a different experience, a different crowd. You're comfortable. Everybody else is doing it. But I said, how do you do it in public? And they gave me kind of tips and pointers of clothing to wear. How to do things so you didn't feel like you were very exposed. And I went to the Little HA League meeting, and they said, have you ever fed in front of a mirror to see what somebody else will really see, which is basically nothing because baby's head is covering you. So I did that, and that was the turning point, and I just got more and more confident with it. And I was like, you know what? I'm feeding you. I don't care if somebody comes and says something, I'll deal with it. And he's 22 months. I've never had anybody say anything to me. So we've gotten very comfortable in feeding him in the carrier, or just, taking a pause, going and finding a seat, or most of the time he's in like this routine now and has been for a very long time where we get into the car and he's like, okay, mommy milkies before getting in the car seat,
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, so.
You had mommy milkies. Did you do sign language too?
Yeah, we did sign language. So we have mommy milkies is what he says, or moo milkies.
I love all the little cute names
yes.
that, and these are things that, like when someone asks you, what are your goals? Like, who's thinking of nursing a 20-something-month old and they're asking for milkies and you're doing sign language? You're like, at that point, you're like, goals? I don't know. But then you get to this point and, I just love hearing your story about all the transitions. It's a huge learning curve. Then you work it out. And you're used to nursing in your own space. Like you said, you put it really nice. It's a different crowd and I'm comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I am in public and there are lots of times when my baby's hungry and what am I going to do? And the covers, some babies are okay with the covers. Some are definitely not. And then you have them kicking and pulling, trying to pull it off and bat away. And
yes.
They're crying because you can't get it all coordinated. And if you do, they're still not happy there with being covered. So it's all transition. And the other thing I love about your story is your wonderful connection and use of the women in your mothers groups in La Leche League, which I think are wonderful. And I steer moms towards breastfeeding mothers groups all the time because they have this huge bank of knowledge. And they are in the trenches along with you, mm-hmm. so much more than I could ever do. And they're talking to you about different things to do and clothes. And I give the tip of the mirror also. It's a huge confidence booster because it actually, like your words were, it shows you what other people are seeing. And you get this vision that other people are seeing or that other people don't like the whole breast taken out, and you just have this vision of being almost totally naked in front of the world. And we all know that that's not the way it is, but in your postpartum mind, that's what you're thinking. And actually, you're doing that a lot at home because you don't need to be fully dressed. And mm-hmm. so you have this vision of what other people are seeing. So I love that tip of sitting in front of a mirror, putting on the clothes that you might normally wear when you're on the outside, and just seeing what it looks like, what other people see. And then you take it to the next level, which to me is the be-all, end-all with nursing convenience on the outside, is using a baby carrier.
Yes. And that's my thing. And he was trained for a while, or would think anytime he's, in the carrier on the front, and he's like, well, my meal ticket's right there. Why can't I have it? And, we're working on manners now because there's times when he'll just try to reach in or try to nurse right away. And I'm like, okay, please wait. But when I teach class, he's there in the carrier. Sometimes I try to get him to go on my back so I don't have to worry about, him nursing the entire time. That's another thing that I've become comfortable with. It's I'm teaching a mommy and me class. I'm just going to breastfeed him, and that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, I want to, yes, we're going to get into that. I want to hear a little bit more about that because that's so much fun to talk about. The other one thing that you brought up that I just wanted to accentuate is that, especially for moms who are listening to the show who are not pregnant yet, planning on becoming, or you're pregnant and don't have your baby yet, when you hear moms like Tori talking about, well, we're working on manners, and people are thinking, manners and breastfeeding, right. And maybe when I get to that point, maybe it's time to quit kind of a thing. And I like to remind people that we're constantly talking about or thinking and needing to do discipline and manners, whether it's, eating food from the table, running around like crazy at a friend's house, not jumping on their couch, 20-month-olds who are running into the street. They may not get everything that we're telling them at the moment. It's a gradual learning experience until they get some of these tasks, but it's this constant evolution. And so to not think just because you now have to start thinking about teaching your baby manners, about nursing in public and grabbing your shirt, there are a lot of other things that, they're going to have tantrums. They're going to start going through your diaper bag and pulling out food and all kinds of fun stuff, right? That we have to realize that we're teaching our kids and working along with them, and they don't always get everything right away. It's a process, right?
Right. And I think so for people, I don't want to scare anyone off of anything, but I remember when the teeth come, that's like when you start with manners, because baby will bite just because that's what feels good, to have that pressure, and they're just not aware that biting your nipple is not very nice. Yeah, that's like the first little manners experience you really have. And I remember the little HE leader saying, this is what I do. And, you see moms out doing that if you're in one of those groups. And then you realize, yeah, you're teaching your baby who's less than 6 months old these manners, and they eventually learn. It's just one of those, it's amazing how they learn these ideas so early, because you are constantly teaching them these things, just like you said.
Yes. And thank you so much for bringing that up too. You brought up so many valuable points in our talk today. And a big thing is the biting, because talk about goals. Moms sometimes come to me and they literally tell me that their goal is to breastfeed until their baby gets teeth, because they just have this vision of teeth. Breastfeeding doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And again, another wonderful plug for breastfeeding mothers groups, because you are seeing moms in the trenches who have had babies who have gotten teeth, and you're seeing how they're working with their babies. You're getting tips and tricks and hacks on how to work it through, and you're seeing that they are getting through it, and you're realizing in just real life, not a book or what someone told you, that this is a part of the nursing relationship and that you can get through it. So thanks so much for just bringing up lots of stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just run on, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours.
It's great because you just have this free-flowing conversation. And, when you're bringing up all these things, I can guarantee you these are all things that other mothers are thinking. So it's coming from a mom in the trenches. And so I really enjoy the free flow of the conversation. Can you talk about just one thing that you have learned about breastfeeding that you would like other mothers to know?
I just think that it is the most convenient thing, because like you said, especially when babies turn 4 months, 6 months, whenever you start giving them solid foods, it's quite a transition to try to plan everything, plan your trips around meal times. A lot of times I would just forget and be and also my son, he did not really get into food until 18 months. We would try, and he just was, not really into it. So I would pack something to see if he would eat, but I'm with him, like you said earlier, the meal ticket's right there. So.
Yes, I like to say straight from the tap. And some babies, your milk has so much nourishment for him and hydration that it's another great source of food when they're really not digging the solid foods yet, until they really get turned on to it and start having likes of different foods that they look forward to. You just know that they're getting pretty well nourished from your milk.
Yes, and it's just the convenience, and there's the connection. And now in the beginning stages, you may not think that while you're sitting and breastfeeding is very relaxing, but as they get older and get more used to it, you kind of get a break because you can sit and relax with baby while they're having their meal, and you get that time to bond. And especially if your baby's getting older and starting to move and go all over the place, and you feel like this precious little baby is now just everywhere, and you don't get that snuggle time, you have that built in, and you just get that bonding time right there with them. So
beautifully said. That's another subject I could go on for a long time about. That was so beautifully said. If you could go back and put your arms around your newly postpartum self and just whisper one thing in your ear, what words of wisdom would you have told yourself?
Just to hang in there and trust your instincts. This goes along with, we didn't even mention this, but I'm going to try to keep it short. My son had all kinds of allergy issues, and the doctors, and I've experienced this with other moms who I've chatted with, become friends with, that their child will have all kinds of issues like acid reflux, lots of spitting up, and the doctor will say they have an allergy and they'll want to switch them to a really what everyone describes as like horrible formula, an expensive formula that just smells terrible. I don't know what it's called, but the super sensitive one. These moms are just so upset because they want to breastfeed, but the doctor's telling them that they need to do this because their kid's not gaining weight, which is all stuff that we dealt with. And I was adamant that we would fix it. It was hard. And people think if they cut out a food, their child's they're going to see the difference the next day, which it's not. I had to cut out dairy and soy for 3 weeks to a month before it was out of my system and Ruben's symptoms decreased. So it's doable. Trust your instinct. Know that you can provide the best for your child by just changing. It may be difficult to change your diet, but you can do it. You are mom. You are strong and you are providing for your child and you know what is best. So if you have any doubt that you think what pediatrician is telling you, a lot of the times, and I know you've talked about this before, they don't have all the training that a lactation consultant has. So go and seek that outside counsel, someone who is more trained in breastfeeding, and to see if there is another option or see what you can do and trust your instinct.
Yeah, thanks again for saying that too, because it is such a common issue. And the reality, what I see happens in the breastfeeding community is that frequently moms are told to take the babies off of their milk and then give milk from a cow in formula or soy. And it's always interesting because sometimes I say to the pediatricians, well, when a baby isn't doing well with formula, when do you ever tell a mom she needs to start breastfeeding?
Ah, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just, it's always just stop the breastfeeding and go to formula. And as you mentioned, if the mainstream formula doesn't work well for your baby, you then relegate it to one of the triple expensive hypoallergenic formula, which also may not work well for your baby. And meanwhile, moms have weaned from pumping or from breastfeeding. Their supply is way, way low or almost non-existent. And now they realize their baby is not doing well on formula either. So I really like what you said and accentuated, and it just is the reality. It's many of the pediatricians, physicians have literally just had, if you ask them, how many hours have you had in breastfeeding training? Most will say that their reality, unless they've gone over and above what they've been required, they really had 1 hour in 8 years of medical school and 12 years of school. And it's a pep talk, and it's talking about the beauties of breastfeeding and the benefits to mom and baby. But the big part that's lacking is all the education that comes from it. So when moms are working with pediatricians who are very pro breastfeeding, that's all great. When they're having difficulties with it, though, most do not have the knowledge to really help a mom see a problem through and let them know, we see you're having a problem, and maybe you do need to supplement, but we're still going to keep working on the breastfeeding.
Yes. And when you were mentioning that just reminded me, I loved your interview with the doctor from, is it Canada? I can't think of his name.
Oh, one of my faves,
yes.
Dr. Jack Newman.
Yes. Well, that was, anybody who's listening, you need to go back and listen to that because that was a great, great interview. Yes. So sorry, side.
Yeah, I don't have that number in my brain, but I will put it in the show notes. But he gave a wonderful, wonderful interview. And didn't you just love how he talked about the relationship with moms and babies, that it's more than just the milk they're getting. You're building a relationship with your baby.
Yes. And after that, I thought of that when I was with Ruben. Yes. And that kind of took me back to thinking of experiences with my pediatrician. Just another story. I apologize.
It's okay. We're like women. We're talking about babies and breastfeeding, and it's so easy to, just have all these thoughts that enter our brain. And I'm like that. I want to capture those thoughts and get them out so that I can talk about them. And so just keep going. It's fine.
Well, we had the same problems, and this is something when other moms would talk to me and say, you know, their baby wasn't gaining weight. Their doctor was saying they needed to change something. We had that so many times. We have had to take Ruben to, you know, weight checks in between all of his well visits. His growth curve has kind of like dwindled, and he was always very small. He was always like under 25%. Now he's down to like the 3rd%, but he is amazingly healthy. He talks in sentences, and, you know, we can see him running around. It's not like he's struggling or lacking anything. And all of these visits, the doctor was trying to say, well, you need to push more food. You need to do this. You need to add in cow's milk. A couple of times ago, they said, well, you need to supplement with like Pediasure because he's not getting enough. We tried it once, and it was just like, why? He would much rather nurse. We're getting him healthy food. And I am so fortunate. My mother-in-law she teaches nutrition through the life cycle. She has like a PhD in dietetics and nutrition. I feel like I would have been so lost if she wasn't helping us through, you know, the information about breastfeeding and information about getting him on solid foods. But she's like, yeah, doctors, they only take account that weight. They're not taking into account any of the other stuff. And why push these supplements if they're getting the proper nutrition? You know, you need to get the proper nutrition rather than just pushing a supplement of Pediasure. But we had so many doctor's visits where they were just like, you need to do this, you need to do that. Finally, like a week and a half ago when he had his last appointment, his weight check, our doctor said, well, you and your husband are both small. We're short. We're, you know, he's average height and I'm average height. So it's not like we're very tall people. And they were like, well, you're pretty small, so he's just going to be small too. And he's staying on the curve, and you're saying he's eating, so just keep doing what you're doing. And she was kind of like wanting me before to decrease my breastfeeding. And this last time she was like, yeah, just breastfeed him as much as he wants, you know? I was like, what?
This is what I do sometimes. I'm like in my head, or if I'm close enough to them, I can say, what pill did you take this morning?
Yeah.
Like, what happened here?
Our pediatrician is wonderful, but those things were our only struggles with her. And she did this, and I was just like, I want to be like, thank you. This is what I've been trying to tell you. Like, we know he is healthy.
Yeah, it's so funny. And you know, thank goodness you did have your mother-in-law, because again, this is what I love about women sharing their stories, because you did have your mother-in-law, you had the support of your husband. And I imagine as breastfeeding went on, you gained confidence in a way that you maybe didn't have the first or second or third month.
Right.
And can you imagine mothers who do not have that support, and they're going in for visits, and they're continually told in many ways that their milk is not good enough. Mm-hmm. Their babies aren't gaining on their milk. They need to give milk from another source, or like you said, Pediasure and other things. And the reality is like your mother-in-law said, I say this to moms, and sometimes they look at me with their eyeballs and their brows scrunched, but I say, well, let's keep working on the breastfeeding, and let's talk about milestones and all of the other things, not just the weight, which I do think is very important, something to be paid attention to. But it's all about balance, and you're looking at all the other parts. And like you said, you have a baby who's almost 2 and a boy who typically takes longer to talk,
right,
speaking in full sentences, healthy development, reaching all the milestones and doing really well. Why on earth would I want to bulk my baby up with sugar-laden foods just so that your scale says that they're gaining weight and then you're happy? Mm-hmm. Like, let's think about the food that we're putting into my baby and how the effect of that. So I just think there was some things it's just tunnel vision. And in this case, it's just purely the weight gain. So I don't know how much accentuated when you went for your visits, the developmental milestones were talked about and accentuated.
Oh, yeah, just like one brief passing. It was, they don't really touch on that much.
Yeah, so the moms listening to this, I'm not telling you one way to go or the other over the microphone because I have to take a look at the whole picture. But I do want to encourage everybody to seek help of someone who has knowledge in diet, nutrition, a lactation consultant, so you can work together with a team and people who have probably thousands of hours together versus, the very short term 1 to 2 hours of information that some of our physicians get. And what do we do with everything else that we were having problems with? We go to experts in that field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would love for you to talk a little bit about the work that you do, because Babies at the Bar, first of all, I love your name.
Oh, thank you.
And I love everything that you do. And I would love for you to tell us in detail about how you came to start your business and what it is that you feel you're getting out of it and your clients are.
Sure. My Babies at the Bar came about because I was fortunate enough to have 6 months leave from work, and my husband is working full-time shift hours as a police officer. So he will work 2 weeks on day shift, 2 weeks on night shift. And on top of that, he is in law school at night. So we were struggling to find childcare. We had discussed it, and if we had the opportunity, we said that I would stay home most likely. And I absolutely loved it. But I had the opportunity to do a Pilates teacher training because before I got pregnant, I saw that as a way of something that I could do after we had kids so that I could kind of set my own schedule and be home and take clients here and there. I was set up to take that. We were, again, very fortunate to get pregnant much faster than we thought would happen. And it was like right when the teacher training was going to start. So I had to postpone that. And being a first-time mom, I like to say, I had no clue. And the next teacher training was started after my son was born. And I said, oh, this is wonderful. I'll be off for 6 months on maternity leave. I will have all the time to do all of this stuff for the class.
Best laid plans, right?
That is a first-time mom for you.
I often say to myself, what was I thinking?
Yes, but I did. I signed up. We worked it out. I have all the classes done, but nowhere near any of the teaching hours because that's the difficulty of trying to find, childcare here and there. But while I was doing that teacher training, or actually before, there was a bar teacher training. And they said, well, do you want to do this? You'll be able to take this and teach classes. I went, and since I was a dancer growing up, and I learned, I had never taken a bar class before, but I knew about them. I went, I took it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to teach. I love being at the bar, even though it's not ballet. I love it. It brings back everything that I haven't done in like over a decade, and I need this back in my life. But I said, this was when Ruben was 4 months old. I said, I was still not comfortable with finding a sitter. And I said, well, I'd be happy to teach a class, but I would have a baby strapped to me. Like, those were my words.
Now, who were you saying this to?
To Allison. We are actually co-owners of a new studio now, but in her studio, she said I could teach bar classes like Mommy and Me style at her Pilates and bar studio.
When you said this to her about a baby being strapped to you, was she someone who you knew would understand what you meant and would be empathetic and possibly open? Or
yes. Yeah,
okay.
She has a daughter who's about 2 years older than Ruben. So she knows, and she would talk about wearing her baby and sometimes teaching if she needed to, if childcare fell through or something. So she's like, yeah, that's great. You can do that. She was amazingly supportive. So I started teaching some classes there, and I had people come in, and it was called something different. Actually, I can't remember off the top. It was something about like baby wearing. But then I was very active in some of like the online Facebook groups locally for moms. And there was an interest in some, Mommy and Me fitness while baby wearing. And I said, I would teach a class like this. And there's a local pregnancy and parenting center, it's called like for the childbirth and first year after center. And they have classes and they were interested. So I basically ended up forming my business, branding myself as Babies at the Bar, and then offering the classes in different areas where people were interested. I started it, just so that I could have something, get out, exercise, and, meet other moms on top of some of the other, just mommy and me groups that I would go to. And it grew, and people were interested in having classes elsewhere. So I developed a course. I wrote a teaching manual, a training manual, and now I certify most of them. I have one non-mom, but they're all new moms who are interested in doing the same thing, maybe don't want to go back to work or want to go back to work less and have some time to exercise, meet other new moms, take baby with them and earn money. And so I never imagined that I would be providing other new moms or even other fitness professionals the opportunity to, form their own small business, set their schedule and earn money. I still can't fathom that is what I'm doing.
And not only that, it's all an incredibly short period of time.
Yes. Yeah. I just had my business birthday in April. So on top of that, then I became a pre and postnatal fitness educator. So I learned more and more about the importance of the pelvic floor and your transverse abdominals and strengthening those after pregnancy and birth. I feel like it's my passion, my mission to educate new moms, educate fitness professionals that after someone has a baby, that certain muscles that are very important for the rest of their lives are weak, and you need to work on those before you start going out and running. Everyone's so into, getting back into pre-pregnancy shape, and sometimes you can go out and start working out like what you did before and cause damage to your body because it's still healing, and your pelvic floor might not be as strong as it was before. And then you have to worry about incontinence and prolapse issues, which people don't like to talk about, but it's much more common than people think. Everyone thinks they're the minority. Why is this happening to me?
Or they're in a group of people that they just think it's normal and this is the way it's supposed to be.
That's true. Yes, that is the other side. But there are options for you to fix that basically and help get your core set up again so that you don't have back problems. You don't have, incontinence issues. You don't have, feeling like you have to run to the bathroom all the time.
What are the abdominal muscles that are so important when you talk about the core?
There are 3 layers of muscles in your abdominals. There's the rectus abdominals, which are the 6-pack. There's your obliques, which wrap around your sides, which are the next layer in. And then the 3rd layer in are called the transverse abdominals. And those are called the corset muscles. During pregnancy, because of the relaxin in a woman's body and because of the growing baby and uterus pressing out on that, the fascia in between that connects your right side and your left side can separate, and you have to heal those back together, because if they're separated and you have a diastasis, that's often called the mummy tummy, which people just think it's what happens after pregnancy. And they have to do a lot of crunches to get rid of that, sometimes people call it a pooch, because basically what happens is your abdominals separate and there's nothing holding basically your organs there.
It's a good visual.
Yeah. In order to heal that and basically get yourself back to that flat stomach or properly your organs where they need to be, and that corset engaged, you have to do certain types of exercises that strengthen and basically build scar tissue back up between your abdominals to heal them.
Is there a time limit approximately after you give birth and when you need to, not need to, but the time frame that you have to really make a difference with these abdominal core muscles?
There are exercises that you can do as soon after birth as you feel comfortable. like laying on the floor, doing like a Kegel and squeezing your belly button back into your spine, doing some like marching, laying on your back, just lifting one leg at a time while squeezing your belly button to your spine. Again, doing like a Kegel. Those things you can do as soon as mom is comfortable after birth. You don't have to wait on those. And say someone has not done anything in their years after baby is born, that's fine. We can still rehab, and they might be in a place that's a little bit better off actually, because as long as that relaxant's in your body, it's going to make it harder for you to heal that, because you have that the relaxant's there to loosen everything, which happens until, you're done breastfeeding. Not to say that you can't heal it while you're breastfeeding, but if you've done nothing, you might be able to heal it quicker because you don't have to fight against that extra hormone that's there in your body.
Are you going to give us a website or some place where our listeners can go to get information on this subject? I think it's so important. I also think that if there's a place that they could go to get written information or connect with you in any way, because I know you're in Philadelphia, and so there are women all over the world. So if they're not local to you, how they can go about getting this information from you?
Yes, my website is www.babiesatthebar, and that's BARRE.com. And I have links to some YouTube videos. I'll post another one, hopefully before this airs, just on some of the exercises, the 2 little exercises I was just talking about. There's links to my social media, and I've written a few articles for some different public, like different online moms groups, and featured in a few things about pelvic floor health and diastasis recti.
I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, do you think that you would be interested in doing a guest blog for my blog?
Oh, definitely. Yes, I could do
Writing
that.
some information. Great. So our listeners can look forward to that too. It has been wonderful, so interesting. We touched on so many things. I'm so glad that you have information on your website to steer all my listeners and the videos, because I think that they're really going to appreciate that. I know that sometimes I can hear the information, but I need to see it in the written word or watch someone in action. So I love that you're doing videos. I think that's going to be fabulous for your business. It's really going to bring and highlight to a lot of people the importance of doing the postpartum exercises, and for you to just highlight the importance of it. I like the way that you explained what happens during pregnancy and why you need to heal yourself after the baby's born. So you really brought it full circle. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I've had a wonderful time talking with you. Like I said, I could go on for hours.
I know the time goes so fast. I think that it was definitely worth it for me. I have an expert now that I'm talking to about issues related to health and our bodies and exercise and getting to those cores after the baby, which, the show is a whole lot about breastfeeding, but there's so much more that we can learn too. And while I have a captive expert guest and a captive audience, I love to do as much education and teaching as I can. So I appreciate you adding all of that great expertise to the show.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to share my passion and message with everybody who listens to your show.
You are very welcome. You have a wonderful day, Tori.
Oh, thank you. You too.